Welcome back, and thank you for being here. This story isn't just about history. It's about what might have happened if Rome had never fallen. We'll travel through time, not to change the past, but to listen to it breathe. Imagine a world where Rome never fell, where the empire learned not to conquer, but to endure. As always, every word you hear tonight was written and shaped by hand, slowly, carefully, so you can rest while the story unfolds. Oh, take a deep breath, dim the lights, and let's step together into an empire that dreamed itself eternal, the empire that never slept. The year is 2775 Abracondite. By the Roman calendar, that means the world has entered what we might have called the 2020s. But here, the centuries have folded differently. Rome never fell. The world outside your window hums not with the noise of cars, but with the deep thrum of engines carved from Roman ingenuity, machines powered by captured lightning, guided by minds trained in Latin logic and imperial discipline. Aqueducts still span the hills, but now they carry not only water but light, streams of energy flowing through translucent marble tubes that glow faintly through the night. Rome never burned, it transformed. At the heart of it all, the eternal city still stands, vast, layered, and radiant. Its marble streets are clean, its columns reinforced, with metals that shimmer beneath the moonlight. From the Palatine Hill, the emperor watches the pulse of civilization through endless terraces of light. Drones, avum machinae, mechanical birds glide silently between the arches of the Colosseum, which now houses the Senate's broadcasting chambers. The same stadium that once echoed with the roar of the crowd now hums with the low voices of policy and philosophy. The empire stretches still, not through conquest, but through continuity. Provinces long lost in another reality remain Roman in this one. From the misty cliffs of Britannia to the burning sands of Arabia, from the icy northern fjords of Germania to the shining domes of Nova Alexandria, the Pax Romana endures. But its peace is not silent. It breathes, like a great beast that never sleeps. Every citizen is taught the same creed from childhood: civitas, concordia, aeternitas. Citizenship, harmony, eternity, the three pillars upon which the modern empire rests. In schools carved into old temples, children still learn Latin before any other tongue. They memorize the sayings of Cicero and the mechanical equations of Vitruvius, whose notebooks, preserved and expanded by imperial scholars, gave birth to a science that merged geometry and theology. Religion changed, but never fractured. The old gods were never exiled, they evolved. Jupiter's lightning became a symbol of energy, Venus the muse of aesthetics and biological design, Mars the patron of disciplined technology. The empire's philosophers spoke not of gods in heaven, but of divine principles within every law of nature. And so, when the rest of the world's empires might have fallen into superstition or silence, Rome's faith aligned with progress itself. In this world, the language of power remains Latin, but its music is softer, more melodic, influenced by centuries of harmony between culture and order. The people walk calmly, not hurried by markets or greed, but guided by ratio et honor, reason and honor, two ancient ideals still whispered through the empire's countless provinces. To the north, Britannia Nova glows with a soft blue aurora. Its fields, once filled with legionnaires, now house vast mirror farms capturing sunlight for the capital. In the east, Byzantium, no longer a rival but a mirror of Rome, stands as the empire's spiritual heart. The Hagia Pantheon, a fusion of Greek and Roman architecture, towers into the clouds like a marble mountain, its dome inlaid with gold-leaf solar panels that sparkle as though the gods themselves are watching. The empire's symbol, the double-headed eagle, now carries new meaning: one head for Earth, one for the stars. For centuries, Roman explorers have mapped the skies as they once mapped the provinces. The imperial calendar includes not just the founding of the city, but the founding of colonies beyond Earth. Colonia Lunae, the moon settlement, built upon basalt domes etched with Latin inscriptions. The phrase, engraved on every entrance, reads, Quod terram regimus caelum quogue. As we rule the earth, so too the heavens. And yet, beneath this grandeur lies the same ancient heartbeat that once pulsed through the veins of the old empire. Politics, pride, ambition, these are eternal. The Senate still debates beneath frescoed ceilings. Factions whisper in the marble corridors. There are still patricians and plebeians, though their roles have shifted into the bureaucracies of a massive technocratic machine. Power is still measured in favors and lineage, but now also in intellect. The Ordo Logica, the order of reason, has replaced the aristocracy of blood. At its center sits the emperor, Octavianus Texanus, direct descendant of the line that once began with Augustus himself. Though elected by the Senate for life, his reign depends not on divine right, but on ratio populi, the rational consent of the people, measured through vast computational councils. He rules not with legions, but with networks, vast legions of machines, their minds shaped by the empire's codices. Each province is guarded not only by soldiers, but by sentient systems sworn to the 12 principles of Roman order. Among them, lex super omnia, the law above all. Scientia sacra est knowledge is sacred. Homo Romanus universalis. The Roman human is universal. It is a civilization that never slept because it never stopped perfecting itself. But perfection comes at a cost. You can feel it walking through the neon-lit forums. Citizens move gracefully, yet with the same uniform rhythm, the rhythm of order. The same kind of order that once built aqueducts now dictates every heartbeat, every word spoken in public. Every citizen carries an impera sigil, a wristbound device that links them to the empire's central archive, Memoria Eterna. It knows their family, their loyalty, their virtues. It remembers their ancestors back to the founding of the city. Freedom exists, but it is measured, cataloged, and recorded in Latin. The story you are about to follow begins in Nova Roma, the imperial capital that rose atop the old one, built in layers, from the ruins of the ancient forum to the shining titanium domes above the clouds. The city stands as both memory and prophecy. From the lowest streets, where old mosaics still tell the tales of Romulus and Remus, to the highest towers where the Senate's drones hover like silent guardians, everything here breathes the same vow, Roma Eterna. And yet, somewhere within this eternal perfection, something begins to stir. A quiet question whispered between scholars and soldiers alike. If Rome has never fallen, has it ever truly risen? The night sky above the capital glows faintly red, reflected from the endless arches of glass. Pilgrims from every province gather at the Pantheon of Knowledge, where the eternal flame, a beam of plasma fed by lightning, burns beneath the oculus. They come to witness the speech of Emperor Octavianus VI, marking the 2000th year of unbroken rule. As his image appears projected across every basilica and forum, his voice fills the empire. People of Rome, guardians of eternity, children of an empire that conquered chaos itself, tonight we honor the dream that never ended. The crowd bows as one, their sigils glowing gold. The empire stands united, perfect, eternal. But in the silence between the echoes, a whisper flickers. Something ancient, buried deep within the marble and the code. waiting for the first crack. In eternity, the shadow beneath the marble. In the heart of Nova Roma, beneath layers of marble and circuitry, lies a school older than the empire itself, the Academia Eterna, where the brightest minds of the empire are trained. Its gates bear an inscription in gold, per legem lumen, per lumen veritas. Through law, light, through light, truth. Students arrive from every province. They come from deserts, islands, mountains, and domed lunar colonies, all to study philosophy, mathematics, and the art of governance. Yet here, every lesson hides another: obedience, precision, and silence. Inside its lecture halls, the past and the future breathe side by side. Marble floors are inlaid with holographic veins of light. Statues of emperors whisper their own words, translated by linguistic engines. A student can walk past Cicero's likeness and hear his voice, perfectly reconstructed. Liberty is not the right to do as you please, but the right to do what is just. But even Cicero's ghost speaks within limits. His words have been edited by the Ordo Logica, the empire's great council of philosophers and scientists, who ensure that every fragment of Roman thought aligns with eternal order. Among the students is Marcus Valerius Serenus, aged 21, born in Britannia Nova, a province of mists and quiet discipline. His family serves the empire faithfully, engineers for 3 generations. His father helped design the solar canals of Hispania. His mother, a linguist, works for the Memoria Eterna archives. Marcus has always been loyal, until now. He walks each morning beneath the towering statues, his impera sigil flickering faintly with the empire's motto. But lately, that glow feels colder. Every time he opens his learning tablet, the lessons arrive perfectly, polished, balanced, symmetrical, too symmetrical. History has no rough edges here. Every war, every betrayal, every emperor is rewritten as a lesson in harmony. And yet, in the library's deepest chamber, Marcus finds something that shouldn't exist. It begins with a whisper of static, hidden behind an old manuscript, a book that the sigil cannot read. Its title is carved by hand, De Silentio Imperii, on the silence of the empire. No author's name, no date, only a single line written beneath the cover. Truth sleeps beneath the stones of order. The book speaks of things no teacher dares mention. It tells of an empire that once faced ruin, of fires that consumed the old city, of men who died defending a dream. It speaks of the fall, the very fall that, according to official doctrine, never happened. Marcus reads in silence, each word like a forbidden prayer. He learns that there was once chaos, rebellion, decay, that the empire once fractured, and that it was reborn not by strength, but by forgetting. According to the manuscript, the empire's survival came not from victory, but from erasure. History itself had been rebuilt, rewritten by the Ordo Logica centuries ago to create the illusion of continuity. He stops reading when he reaches a single phrase, one that echoes in his mind long after the words fade. Roma non aeterna fuit, se facere im aeternum menque. Say, Rome was not eternal to make it eternal, was the lie. Marcus hides the book inside his robe and leaves the library, his heart heavy. Outside, the empire glows as always, pure, beautiful, flawless. But now every column looks hollow, every statue too polished. He passes under the great arch of Concord, where citizens walk in perfect rhythm, guided by subtle signals from their sigils. Above, great banners show the emperor's face, serene and timeless. Beneath, vendors sell nectar drinks and data scrolls, all marked with the imperial seal. To everyone else, this world is paradise. To Marcus, it has begun to feel like a dream someone refuses to wake from. That night, in his dormitory overlooking the river Tiberium, Marcus lies awake. The ceiling reflects the constellations, each star labeled with Latin coordinates, but his eyes focus on a faint crack running through one of the marble panels. It's barely visible, but it's there. A flaw. He wonders how many cracks hide beneath the empire's perfect skin. He takes out the book again and whispers its title aloud, De Silentio Imperii. The sound of the forbidden words seems to shift the air itself. His sigil flickers, registering the unapproved term, then quickly resets, as though pretending not to notice. But something does notice. Across the city, in the Hall of Records, the Memoria Eterna hums with life. It watches everything not as a single mind, but as a choir of voices stored across thousands of crystal archives. When Marcus speaks the words, the system detects a pattern. Within moments, a new line appears in the Empire's surveillance log. Anomaly 7732. Category: Linguistic Deviance. Location: Academia Eterna. Sector X. The report travels upward through layers of command. First to the Senate Subcommittee on Thought Integrity, then to the Office of Prefectus, Lucilla Vara, one of the Empire's highest officials. Lucilla, calm and precise, reviews the anomaly. Her eyes are silver gray, her robe marked with the insignia of the Ordo Logica. She reads the report and whispers, "Another sleeper awoken." Then softly, "Seal." The next day, Marcus arrives for his lessons. Everything feels unchanged. But when he opens his terminal, the book is gone. The records show no sign it ever existed. Even the shelf where he found it now bears a holographic barrier. Access restricted. Level, 2 levels. He feels the same chill he once admired in the Empire's perfection. He looks at his classmates, serene, attentive, unquestioning, and for the first time he realizes how deep the silence runs. He decides to find out who wrote De Silentio Imperii. To do that, he will need to leave Nova Roma, something forbidden for any student without imperial permission. That night, he walks to the old catacombs beneath the city. Few go there anymore. They are considered sacred archives of the pre-mechanical age. The corridors are lined with statues, philosophers, soldiers, poets, all bearing blank faces. Marcus carries only a small lamp and the fragment of a phrase copied from the book. Seek the city beneath the city, seek the voice that remembers. He moves deeper, past inscriptions faded by centuries. The air grows thick, and the hum of the city fades, until all that remains is the sound of dripping water. Then he finds it, a hidden gate carved with an old imperial crest, the eagle cracked and worn. Beneath it, another phrase, etched in rough hand. Bona dormit. Rum sleeps? He touches the stone. It slides open with a whisper, revealing a staircase descending into light. Below, he finds a chamber unlike any other, filled with ancient terminals and marble consoles, glowing faintly with a light that seems alive. A figure stands waiting, a woman in a simple robe, her eyes reflecting the faint blue of the screens. "Welcome, Marcus Valerius Serenus," she says softly. "You have read." The silence. He stares, unable to speak. He smiles. "I am Alia, keeper of the unwritten history." He steps closer. "You mean the fall? It really happened?" She nods. "Yes, the empire you live in was rebuilt from fragments, from fear of loss. They erased failure to preserve eternity. But Truth, she pauses, truth always remembers. Alia leads him to an old device, a crystalline sphere rotating inside a marble frame. This is the first memoria, the true one. It remembers what the Empire chose to forget. Inside the sphere, images shimmer. Cities burning, temples collapsing, emperors begging the gods for mercy. The fall, then the rebuilding, engineers reprogramming archives, deleting centuries, rewriting law and history alike. The Ordo Logica, she says, saved Rome by making it forget, but forgetting is never eternal. Marcus watches, transfixed. Why show me this? Because, Alia says, the silence is breaking again. The Empire's perfection is decaying. You have seen the crack. You heard the echo. That means it has begun. Marcus feels both awe and terror. What happens if truth returns? He asks. Alia touches the sphere. It flickers like a dying star. Then Rome must fall, not in ruin, but in awakening. Her eyes meet his. And you, Marcus, will decide whether eternity continues or ends. The sphere pulses once more, casting long shadows across the marble floor. In its light, the statues seem to move, as if the old gods are stirring in their sleep. Above them, the city of perfection glows, unaware that beneath its shining streets, history has begun to breathe again, the voices of the forgotten. The chamber beneath Nova Roma is colder than stone, yet alive with light. The air hums softly as if breathing. The ancient memoria, a crystalline sphere larger than any man, floats above its marble cradle, whispering fragments of forgotten voices. Roma cecidit sed surrexit mendatio. Rome fell, but rose by a lie. Marcus stands still, listening. The sphere flickers with images that feel both alien and familiar. The burning of old Rome, senators fleeing through smoke, citizens screaming prayers to silent gods. And then, the reconstruction, endless lines of scribes erasing names from archives, replacing emperors with ideals, turning failure into myth. Alia watches him quietly. You are seeing what only a few in all history have seen, she says. Truth stripped of perfection. Marcus lowers his head. If the empire is built on a lie, what becomes of its people? Nothing changes, she replies softly. They still love, still build, still dream. The lie was not to enslave them, but to protect them. But protection, she pauses, is only another form of control. The room trembles faintly as the sphere fades into stillness. Alia gestures toward a corridor lined with pillars, each engraved with names, thousands of them. These, she says, are the voices of the forgotten, men and women erased from memory to preserve eternity. Scholars, senators, dreamers, anyone who questioned the perfection of Rome. Marcus runs his fingers across the names. Some are carved shallowly, as if the stone itself hesitated to remember. He stops at one, Lucius Septimus Varro. Who was he? Alia smiles faintly. The founder of our circle. 2 centuries ago, he uncovered the first forbidden archive, the proof that Rome had rewritten its own fall. For that, he was declared non-existent. Every record of him was deleted. But here, she touches the pillar. He remains. They walk deeper into the catacombs, passing rooms filled with fragments of history, broken mosaics showing soldiers burning scrolls, fragments of statues of forgotten emperors, pieces of marble with dates that no longer exist in official records. Each artifact hums with faint light, embedded with what Alia calls memory code, a secret language older than digital systems. It's how the silent circle preserves the truth without alerting the Empire's censors. Every piece of stone, every note, carries encrypted fragments of history. Alia explains the Ordo Logica believes it controls all knowledge, but it cannot read what it erased. The human mind remembers patterns even when the words are gone. That is our weapon. Marcus feels a strange sense of purpose rising within him. Then why not reveal this to everyone? Show them the truth. Elia turns to him, her eyes shadowed by the flickering light. Because they wouldn't believe it. The Empire has given them peace for 2,000 years. To tear that illusion apart would destroy more than lies. It would destroy their sense of meaning. Later, Marcus sits alone, beside a low burning lantern. While Aelin he takes out his Impera sigil, watching its soft golden light. The device hums gently, connected to the Empire's great network, the same system that records every heartbeat, every word, every dream. He wonders how much it knows of him now. Does it sense the forbidden truth inside his mind? Does it already whisper his name to the watchers above? He imagines the great archives in the Senate towers, filled with streams of light, names flowing like rivers. And somewhere among them, perhaps his own, glowing red. Elia approaches quietly. "Sleep," she says gently. "You will need your strength. Tomorrow you meet the circle." The next day, Aelia leads him through a maze of tunnels until they reach a vast underground hall. Hundreds of figures stand in silence, dressed in simple robes marked only by a symbol, a cracked laurel wreath encircling an open eye. A voice speaks from the shadows. "Our peace was built on forgetting, but the forgotten remember." The speaker steps into the light, an old man, tall and thin, his voice calm but deep. "I am Gaius Nero, keeper of the first memory." He looks at Marcus. "So you are the one who read De Silentio Imperii. You've awakened the protocol." Marcus blinks. "Protocol?" Gaius nods. "When the book is read, the Empire knows. It marks the reader as anomaly. You are now a ghost in their system, erased from public records, but hunted in secret." Marcus feels his pulse quicken. "So they know?" "They always know." Alea says softly, "But the more they erase, the more unstable the memoria becomes. Every deletion weakens the Empire's code." The circle gathers around a circular pool at the center of the hall. Water so still it reflects their faces like mirrors. Aelia explains that this pool connects directly to the old aqueduct systems, carrying not just water but data currents, the Empire's neural network. The circle has learned to intercept whispers from the Moria Athena. Gaius places his hand over the pool. The surface ripples, forming faint images, shifting Latin words, fragments of old recordings. A voice emerges, mechanical but ancient. "Carium Eternum. Stability at risk. Unauthorized pattern. Serminus." Marcus steps back, his breath catching. "That's my name." "Yes," says Gaius. "The Empire is searching for you." He pauses, then looks up at the gathering. "It is time," he says, "to show him the other truth." From a side chamber, they bring forth a small metallic cube, carved with Latin inscriptions glowing faintly red. "This," says Aelia, "is one of the 12 codices, the original machines that rebuilt Rome after the fall. Each codex controlled one aspect of the Empire: law, memory, energy, faith, and so on." Gaius adds, "The Ordo Logica controls 11. But we found this one, the 12th, the Codex of Truth." You touch the cube. It hums softly, emitting a faint pulse that feels almost alive. Marcus feels it in his chest, not just sound, but memory. Images flood his mind. An emperor standing amid ashes, vowing that Rome would never die again. Engineers rewriting time, the first memoria being activated. He gasps, "It's alive!" Aaliyah nods. It remembers, but it does not obey. Laius speaks. The empire's perfection depends on control of memory. The Codex of Truth can unlock every erased moment, but doing so will also erase the illusion that sustains our world. He looks at Marcus. Someone must carry it, someone unrecorded, untraceable. You are already erased in their eyes. You can walk unseen through their systems. Marcus realizes the weight of what they ask. You want me to bring it to the surface, to the emperor. Gaius nods. He must see the truth, or the empire will collapse without understanding why. Aelia places a hand on Marcus's shoulder. You were not chosen by accident. The book found you because your bloodline carries memory from before the rewriting. Your ancestors lived through the fall. Marcus stares into the glowing cube. Within its red light, he sees faint reflections of ruined cities, forgotten gods, and endless processions of silent citizens. The truth is beautiful and terrifying. He accepts the codex. Its warmth seeps into his palms like the pulse of a living thing. As he holds it, the hall grows quieter. Every member of the circle bows their head, whispering the old vow. Memoria non moritur. Memory does not die. For the first time in his life, Marcus feels part of something greater than Rome itself, something older, more human. He looks up. I will go, he says softly. I will bring the truth to the light. The circle remains silent, but their eyes glimmer with hope and fear. As Marcus leaves the catacombs, the first light of morning filters down through cracks in the stone. Above him, advanced planning and pending. This is Fosca. Flawless. Shiny. Also, final note. Let me try to make up for the time that Luke did not audition. He walks upward, carrying in his hands the one thing Rome has feared for 2,000 years. Its own truth, the emperor's dream. Above the marble city, dawn descends like a ceremony. Nova Roma awakens not with chaos, but with harmony. Thousands of domes opening in sequence, fountains bursting in patterns designed 2 centuries ago by imperial mathematicians. The city breathes in rhythm. Every window glows at the same pulse, as though the metropolis itself were alive, a single organism dreaming of eternity. Marcus walks among this perfection, cloak drawn tight around the codex he carries. The streets are silent, save for the low hum of grav carts gliding along invisible paths. He passes temples that shimmer with living mosaics, scenes from myth animated by nanolight, and statues that turn their heads gently as citizens walk by, recognizing loyalty by face, by heart rate, by calm. Everywhere order, everywhere beauty, and beneath it all a whisper that only Marcus can hear now, the heartbeat of something restless. Memoria non moritur. Far above, in the highest tower of the Palatine Spire, Emperor Octavianus VI stands before a panoramic view of his city. He is old, though his face remains youthful, preserved by the same technology that guards the empire's marble. His robe is pure white, threaded with gold, the twin eagle sigil embossed over his heart. He watches the sunrise with the silence of a man who no longer sees it. To him, dawn is a ritual, not a wonder. Behind him, the room hums softly with the voices of advisors projected as holographic sigils, members of the Ordo Logica. They speak in measured tones, their words precise, their cadence mathematical. Population stability optimal. Energy reserves at 97%. No major descent detected in lower provinces. The emperor nods absently. Then a pause. However, anomaly 7732 persists. Academia Aeterna. He turns. Describe it. A voice answers. A student. Marcus Valerius Serenus. Thought deviation detected. Artifact interaction confirmed. Trace lost near subterranean district IX. The emperor's eyes narrow. Has the Senate approved pursuit? The Senate was not informed, Imperator. You ordered silence. He exhales slowly. Yes, I remember. Sob piano chord. The first human sound in the room. He waves his hand and the projections vanish. The room falls quiet. Octavianus walks to a marble table where an ancient bronze coin rests, worn smooth by centuries. It bears the face of Augustus, the first of his line. He whispers to the coin, "Did you know what you were building, ancestor? That eternity would feel like a cage." He closes his eyes. The empire never sleeps, and so neither does its ruler. But lately, his dreams have begun to return. Each night, when he closes his eyes, he sees fire. He sees a city burning, not the Nova Roma of his waking world, but something older, more fragile, more alive. He sees people crying, pleading to gods who do not answer. He sees himself among them, though he does not understand why. When he wakes, his advisors tell him it is an anomaly in his neural patterns, a result of temporal inheritance, the genetic echo of ancestors whose memories still linger. But deep inside, the emperor knows it is more than that. It is history itself, trying to be remembered. As Marcus ascends the city's tiers, the codex begins to react. At first it is only warmth, then whispers, then light. He hides in the shadow of a basilica, opening his cloak slightly. The cube glows faint red, projecting faint Latin symbols into the air. Acasus, recordatio veritas. Fall, memory, truth. It vibrates like something alive, attuned to the imperial network above. Marcus looks up. The Palatine spire pierces the clouds like a pillar of divine architecture. A tower said to house not just the emperor, but the living interface of the Memoria Eterna itself. He knows he must reach it. He blends into the crowds of citizens, his sigil now manually disabled by the Circle's engineers. Without it, he is invisible and illegal. Every few steps, mechanical drones pass overhead, scanning. He walks like a ghost among the living. Above, the emperor stands before his council chamber, eyes heavy. The room's ceiling is painted with the constellations of every Roman colony, Earth, Luna, Mars, and beyond, each connected by golden lines. He speaks to an attendant machine, a humanoid figure of marble and light. "Tell me," he says softly, "why does perfection still ache?" The machine answers in flawless Latin, "Perfection is the end of progress, Imperior. When nothing can improve, desire becomes decay." He almost smiles. Then perhaps imperfection is divine. The machine tilts its head, unable to compute that thought. In that silence, Octavianus feels something human, a tremor of rebellion. Though he cannot name it, At the base of the spire, soldiers stand in perfect formation, their armor gleaming silver, faces hidden behind mirrored visors. Marcus waits until nightfall. The codex pulses faintly, synchronizing with the city's power grid. Then, for a moment, the lights around the spire flicker, a signal from the silent circle. He moves. We pass the first gate, past the guards distracted by false readings, through corridors of glass and gold, where history itself hums beneath his feet. Finally, he stands before the lift that leads directly to the Emperor's chamber. Its door is made of obsidian, etched with Latin script that reads, Ad summum per ordinem perfidum. To the summit, through order, through faith. He places the codex against the panel. It glows. The door opens without a sound. The lift ascends silently. Through its transparent walls, Marcus sees the entire empire beneath him. Domes, forums, aqueducts, all glowing like veins of gold. The city looks infinite, eternal. Yet from this height, it also looks fragile, like glass stretched too thin. When the lift stops, he steps into silence. No guards, no attendants, only the sound of wind and distant thunder. He enters a vast hall lit by soft golden light. At its center stands a single figure, cloaked in white, gazing out at the horizon. "Who enters my solitude?" the Emperor asks without turning. Marcus's voice trembles. "A Roman, my lord. One who remembers." Octavianus turns. His eyes are calm, ancient, endlessly tired. He studies the young man for a moment, then the glowing cube in his hands. "I know that light," he says quietly. "I saw it once, in my father's dreams." Marcus bows. "It is truth, Imperator." "Truth," the Emperor repeats, almost to himself. Such a dangerous word. He gestures to a marble bench beside him. "Sit. Speak." Marcus obeys, his heart pounding. He tells the story of the book, The Catacombs. The circle, the forgotten history. As he speaks, the Emperor listens without interruption. When Marcus finishes, silence fills the hall. At last, Octavianus speaks. "You believe the empire is built on a lie." Marcus hesitates. "I know it, my lord." The Emperor walks slowly toward him, the light of the codex reflecting in his eyes. "Then tell me," he says, "is peace worth truth's destruction?" Marcus cannot answer. The Emperor continues, softer now. "I have seen the chaos that comes with freedom. I have read the accounts of the ages before control, famine, betrayal, endless war. If the lie keeps humanity from devouring itself, perhaps it is mercy." Marcus looks at him steady. "And if it also keeps us from living?" The Emperor's gaze softens. "You speak like one who dreams of a world beyond Rome." "I dream of a world where Rome remembers," Marcus replies. Octavianus smiles faintly, weary, knowing. He looks out over the city again. "I too have dreamed every night of the fire, of the fall." He turns to Marcus. "Do you think I don't know the truth? Do you think the Ordo Logica hides it from me?" Marcus blinks. "You know?" The Emperor nods. "I have seen the records. I have walked the ruins buried beneath this palace. I know what Rome was and what it became. I let the lie live because the truth would end us. Humanity needs illusions as much as oxygen." He looks down at the codex, but perhaps eternity has lasted long enough. He reaches out, touches the codex. It hums, reacting to his pulse. For a moment, both men see the same vision, the empire collapsing and rebuilding in endless cycles, each time more perfect, more sterile, less human. Octavianus withdraws his hand. "I see now why it chose you," he murmurs. Then, more firmly, "If Rome must remember, let it remember through you." Marcus stares, breathless. "And you would allow it." "Not allow," the emperor says softly. "Accept. The dream cannot continue forever." He turns toward the window one last time. "Go, Marcus Valerius Serenus. Take the codex to the Memoria Aeterna. Let truth awaken. And if Rome falls again, let it be for something real." Marcus bows deeply, then turns toward the exit. As he leaves, the emperor remains at the window, watching the storm gather over his perfect city. He whispers to himself, "Roma aeterna fuit, sed homines non sunt." Rome was eternal, but men are not. The first thunder rolls across the sky. For the first time in 2,000 years, the eternal city trembled. The storm over Nova Roma grew without sound. Lightning flashed behind the marble domes, illuminating the golden eagles perched atop each one. The empire had never known rain like this, real rain, not the gentle engineered mist that nourished the gardens of order. So this was something older, wilder, the kind of storm that once made men pray to gods. Marcus moved through it, cloak soaked, the codex of truth glowing through the fabric like a second heartbeat. Each step toward the Memoria Aeterna felt heavier, as though the air itself resisted him. Above him, drones faltered in the wind, lights flickered along the imperial bridges. It was as if the city, the machine that never slept, was beginning to dream. He crossed the Forum of Harmony, where the statues of emperors lined the path like silent witnesses. Each one glimmered faintly under the lightning, faces too perfect to seem human. And yet, in the flashing light, Marcus imagined he saw their marble lips tremble, as though whispering prayers, for the first time in centuries. He reached the base of the great archive, a tower of glass and white stone rising into the storm clouds. The Memoria Aeterna. Its surface was etched with flowing Latin code, each symbol a law, each word a memory. Inside it lived the empire's soul, the record of every life, every decree, every dream. He pressed his hand to the door. The codex pulsed. The door opened like a sigh. Inside, the air shimmered. Thousands of light threads hung from the ceiling like suspended rain, each one a stream of stored thought. The chamber was endless, a cathedral of memory. At its center, a single column of blinding light rose toward infinity. Marcus could feel it vibrating through his bones. He stepped forward, the codex warm in his palms. Its red glow deepened, resonating with the light around him. For a moment, the entire chamber seemed to breathe. A voice, neither male nor female, filled the air. Identity detected. Anomaly. Marcus Valerius Serenus. Access forbidden. Marcus spoke softly, his voice trembling yet clear. Rome cannot forbid what it has forgotten. The codex answered before the system could respond. It opened in his hands, unfolding like a flower of light. Symbols older than the empire poured into the air, living, shifting, shimmering. The Memoria Aeterna flickered. The perfect order of Rome's memory began to distort. Images spiraled across the walls. Wars once erased, emperors who never existed, faces of citizens long deleted. The system tried to resist, restoring, correcting, rewriting, but the codex was older, stronger. Its light spread upward through the chamber, turning the golden white into crimson and amber, the color of fire and dawn. Outside, across the city, lights began to fail. Screens flickered in forums, temples, and schools. For the first time in living memory, citizens looked up in confusion. They saw lightning split the sky above the Palatine spire. And then the imperial seal dissolve into static. The emperor, high in his tower, felt it before his machines reported it. A pulse like a heartbeat not his own, echoing through the foundations of the city. He looked to the horizon and saw the storm converging over the Memoria Eterna. He whispered to himself, almost in reverence. "Is so it begins." His advisors screamed through comlinks, voices breaking with panic. "System breach. The archive is rewriting itself." Anomaly spreading across provinces. The emperor silenced them with a single word. "Let it." He closed his eyes. For the first time, he felt the weight of the centuries lifting and something human stirring beneath. Inside the archive, Marcus stood in the storm of memory. The codex levitated from his hands, spinning slowly. Its light began to project not destruction, but remembrance. He saw the empire's birth, the struggle, the ambition, the blood. He saw the fall, the chaos, the desperation, the hope. He saw engineers rebuilding not cities, but stories. And he saw the people across millennia trading truth for peace. The images flowed through him like water through stone. He understood then the lie was not evil. It was love, flawed, fearful, protective love. Rome had hidden the truth not out of cruelty, but out of terror that humanity could not survive its own reflection. Tears filled his eyes. He whispered into the storm of light. "Then let them remember, not to hate, but to feel." The codex responded. The crimson light softened into gold. The swirling storm of data slowed, reshaped, and spread outward. All across the empire, the Memoria Eterna opened its vaults. Citizens froze as their sigils flickered. Suddenly, visions filled their minds. Not messages, but memories. They saw the real history: wars, betrayals, heartbreaks, births, laughter, decay, rebirth. They saw imperfection. They saw humanity. And instead of chaos, there was silence. Deep, collective silence. A moment where an entire civilization remembered who it truly was. In the Senate chambers, senators wept openly. In the temples, priests knelt before altars that now flickered with scenes of forgotten gods. In the streets, people embraced one another, not understanding why, only that something vast and tender had awakened inside them. The emperor stood on his balcony, watching the lights shift across the city. Nova Roma, for the first time in centuries, looked alive. Not perfect, alive, he whispered. And so this is what truth feels like. The rain washed over his face, mixing with tears he did not try to hide. Inside the archive, Marcus collapsed to his knees. The codex hovered before him, its glow dimming. Lively situation. Aelia's voice echoed faintly in his mind. The memory of her words. "If Rome must fall, let it fall awake." He smiled weakly. The empire was not burning. It was breathing. Days passed, or perhaps only moments. Time lost its rhythm as the empire adjusted to remembering. Some cities rebelled, others prayed, others simply sang. But there was no great collapse, no apocalypse. Only transformation. The Ordo Logica dissolved, its members vanishing into the provinces. The Senate reopened the archives to the people, and high above the emperor withdrew from sight, his image replaced by a single phrase across every forum screen: Vertice Pax, truth and peace. Marcus walked once more through the streets of Nova Rome. Children played in the rain. Old statues no longer whispered only of perfection, but of memory. The empire remained not eternal, but real. He looked up at the great sky, now free of banners and projections. Lightning no longer frightened him. It reminded him of light breaking stone, the sound of change. He whispered softly, Roma vivit, Rome sentit. Rome lives, Rome feels. And somewhere, deep within the earth, the codex pulsed one final time, then went still. It began not with celebration, but with quiet. Theater Nova Roma woke slowly after the storm, as though the entire city had taken a long, unremembered breath. The marble streets glistened with rain. The fountains, once synchronized by the empire's pulse, now flowed at their own rhythm. And for the first time in centuries, no command echoed through the loudspeakers, no anthem played through the plazas. Only the sound of water and life. The Pax Eterna, the eternal peace, had ended, but something gentler had taken its place. In the days that followed, the empire's people walked, as if discovering their world anew. Farmers in Britannia saw the dawn without forecasts. Architects in Alexandria built with imperfection on purpose, leaving cracks in the stone as if to honor the brokenness of history. Children in the streets of Hispania sang songs in forgotten dialects, melodies their grandparents had never been allowed to teach. In temples, the priests no longer recited the codes of order. They spoke of the gods again, not as rulers, but as mirrors of the human spirit. Venus for love imperfect, Mars for struggle noble, Jupiter for justice uncertain. The divine had returned, not to command, but to remind. And what of the emperor? The world searched for him, but he was gone. The Palatine spire remained, its top shrouded in mist, but no one entered. Some said he died in the storm, others said he walked among the people disguised as a traveler. But most believed the truth, that he had simply laid down the burden of eternity and become memory himself. Every forum carried the same final decree, his last words recorded in the Memoria Eterna before it fell silent. Let Rome breathe, let it remember, let it dream again. Marcus Valerius Serenus was never found. Some said he vanished in the archives, others claimed to have seen him walking by the Tiber at dawn, his cloak glowing faintly in the mist. The silent circle dispersed, not in hiding, but in purpose fulfilled. They had not destroyed the empire, they had transformed it. Without the Ordo Logica's control, the Memoria Aeterna became what it was meant to be, a living chorus of memory, accessible to all. Citizens could speak to it, listen to voices of their ancestors, learn from mistakes once erased. History became a conversation instead of a decree. In one of the empire's new schools, a child asked her teacher, why did they hide the truth? The teacher smiled. Because truth is like the sun, it blinds before it warms. And Marcus taught us how to open our eyes. Across the provinces, change unfolded gently. Trade resumed not under the strict laws of balance, but through trust. Senators debated with passion again, sometimes even anger, the first sign of life in their voices in generations. The empire did not collapse, it simply began to breathe like a mortal thing. The old motto, Civitas Concordia Eternitas, still adorned every building, but now citizens added a fourth word beneath it, painted, carved, whispered in every dialect of the empire. Veritas, truth. No decree made it official, it simply appeared, like moss on marble, inevitable and alive. In time, the new scholars began writing again, not polished doctrines, but stories. They wrote of the years of silence, of the city that forgot itself, of the student who carried the codex of truth. But his name was never written the same way twice. Sometimes he was Marcus Valerius Serenus, sometimes simply the Rememberer. Children recited his story at night before sleep. Once there was a boy who taught the world to remember. And when they looked up at the stars, the same stars that once guided Roman legions and philosophers. They believed that somewhere out there, Marcus still walked between them, carrying a spark of truth through eternity. Generations passed. The empire's borders softened, its maps changed, but its spirit endured, not as dominion, but as dialogue. Each province became a voice in a grand conversation, not an echo of a single order. And though the old towers still stood, cracked and weathered, no one repaired them. They were left to crumble slowly, reminders of what had been learned, that perfection is the slowest death, and imperfection the truest life. In the quiet of a new age, the Memoria Aetina still whispers. It no longer commands, it listens. And sometimes, in the deepest hour of night, when the city sleeps and the air hums softly with the echoes of rain, a voice can be heard through its circuits, calm, familiar, timeless. Roma vivit in cordibus eorum, qui meminerunt. Rome lives in the hearts of those who remember. The people do not fear the voice. They smile in their sleep. After the storm, rumors walked faster than soldiers. They said a young man had entered the heart of memory and left as silence fell across the eternal city. No one saw him go, and yet his presence lingered, not in statues or triumphal arches, but in how people breathed when they said his name. Sometimes they called him Marcus Valerius Serenus, sometimes simply the Rememberer. Children asked their grandparents who he was, and the elders would answer with a smile. Called Renew is the one who gave us back the pieces of ourselves. No decree made him a hero, no anthem sang his glory. Memory itself did. In the first quiet years, Rome learned to live without perfection. The Senate, uncertain yet sincere, created a new chamber, not of law but of listening. They named it Curia Memoriae, the Council of Memory. Anyone, citizen or foreigner, could speak there for 1 hour each month. The only rule was this: non disputamus ad vincendum sed ad intellectum. We do not debate to win, but to understand. The Curia had no power to issue decrees. It held a different authority to change the hearts that wrote them. In schools, the first class of the day was now Historia Viva, living history. Students did not memorize a single text. They compared chronicles that contradicted each other, learning to read for empathy rather than certainty. Their teachers would say, "The first duty of a Roman is not obedience, it is awareness." Temples opened their doors to doubt. Priests no longer defended the gods as flawless, they tended to them as mirrors. The old pantheon returned as parables of the human condition. Jupiter, the force that judges; Venus, the force that binds; Mars, the courage to fight without hatred; Minerva, the quiet intelligence that chooses patience over pride. And so faith became again what it had been before the codices, not an answer, but a companion. In this new light, stories of the Rememberer changed shape. A widow in Hispania claimed he sat with her one evening, listening to the names of those she had lost to the years of silence, then left her with a single sentence: "Grief is memory refusing to be erased." A mason in Alexandria swore a young stranger helped him repair a cracked arch, insisting they leave the fracture visible. When the mason protested, the stranger said softly, "Cracks let the dawn in." A child in Britannia described a traveler who taught her to read the stars not as maps of empire, but as letters, in a love letter written by time. "Who was he?" she asked. Her mother answered, "He is the one who moved the mirror so we could see." No one could prove these meetings happened. But the empire did not ask for proof anymore. Yet even in gentler times, Rome learned that truth carries weather. Some longed for the old rhythm, the synchronized fountains, the shared anthem, the comfort of certainty. They gathered under banners of Ordo Novi, the new order, not the old Ordo Logica, but its ache. They marched with disciplined steps and whispered, "We cannot live by cracks, we must be one again." They were not violent at first. They asked only for clean lines, for restored hymns, for schedules that never changed. But order once invited always wants more room. In the provinces, governors courted the Ordo Novi to regain predictability in taxes and trade. In Fora, some senators promised a softer perfection, not a cage, merely a frame. The Curia Memoriae listened. The people listened, but they did not bow, because remembrance had become a habit, like breathing after nearly drowning. To protect the fragile practice of truth, neighborhoods formed circles known as vigiles memoriae, watchers of memory. They were not police. They carried no weapons. They walked the streets at night with small lamps and asked a single question to those who shouted for a simpler world. What pain is asking you to forget? Sometimes the question dissolved anger. Sometimes it unveiled hunger, loneliness, shame. In many cases, the watchers offered bread, a listening ear, or a place to sleep. Their motto, Panis, Solatium Testamentum. Read Comfort Witness. In time, the Ordo Novi shrank, not because it was defeated, but because it was understood. Beyond Earth, the colonies had felt the storm as a whisper over their circuits. On Luna, the domes of Colonia Lunae dimmed for a heartbeat when the codex opened. And in that breath, a miner remembered the day her partner died in a cave collapse, a death the system had classified as necessary and therefore forgettable. She wrote his name in dust on the basalt wall. Others followed. Soon the lunar tunnels glittered with constellations of chalked names. The first cemetery made of starlight. On Mars, in Ares Vallis, engineers gathered around a cracked display and told stories of the ships that failed before success was possible. They raised small glasses and said, "To the beautiful mistakes." The toast traveled faster than any supply line, and morale rose without an algorithm's permission. The Empire learned a law older than any codex, that courage grows where sorrow is allowed to speak. In the archives, no longer walled but gardened, scholars cultivated contradictory rooms. Each contained two histories of the same event. Visitors sat between them in silence for a quarter hour, then wrote letters, not to the state, but to the people they would become. The most visited room was titled, "The Fall That Saved Us." One side declared, "Rome never fell." The other whispered, "Rome fell and learned to stand without pretending to float." Children left drawings there, broken laurel wreaths, sprouting flowers, eagles flying with feathers missing, cities where scaffolds never came down. The docents framed them without names. "Let the future claim them," they said. One night, in Nova Roma, a small procession wound through narrow streets. No torches, no trumpets, only candles cupped in palms. They stopped at a plain wall in the subterranean district where damp had turned stone into a soft calendar of stains. At the wall's center, someone had carved a tiny open eye inside a cracked laurel. No plaque named the place, yet everyone knew. They read softly from the vow of waking, words first spoken in the catacombs when the silent circle still hid from perfection. We choose the long road. We choose the open wound. We choose to love what time refuses to polish. When they finished, the candles went out as one. The darkness did not frighten them. It felt like the night before a harvest. In the 7th year after the storm, a message appeared without signature on public walls across the provinces, as if written by the wind. Munamnis veritas est ferrum, quidam est aqua vibe lente. Not all truth is iron, some is water. Drink slowly. No one claimed authorship. Many believed it was the emperor, wherever he had gone. Many believed it was the rememberer. A boy asked a watcher of memory, "How do we know?" The watcher smiled. "We don't. That is why we listen." The Senate, learning to govern by questions, invited artisans to design spaces where remembrance could become daily practice. Architects proposed breathing streets. Alleys widened into courtyards where fountains ran unevenly, forcing passers-by to slow, to watch, to wait. Engineers redesigned transit hubs to include pausing arches, shallow vaults that softened sound long enough for a thought to finish forming before the next one began. Cities became readable again, not as efficient puzzles, but as poems. On festival nights, Nova Roma uncoiled its new ritual, Noctes Fracturae, Nights of Fracture. Families brought a piece of something broken, a chipped bowl, a snapped toy, a frayed letter, and repaired it together in the piazzas with gold-tinted resin. The practice spread from province to province until the empire's objects glittered with thin veins of light. Visitors from beyond Rome called it beautiful. Romans called it normal. Still, some wounds lay deeper than ritual. In a quiet house along the Tiber, an old woman sat with a box of letters that had survived the silent years. Each was stamped inadmissible to record by some forgotten office. All were love letters. She could not read any more. Her granddaughter, a student of Historia Viva, came each evening to be her eyes. One night, the girl found at the bottom a letter without seal, written in a steady hand. "If you read this, then the storm has given you back what we couldn't keep."
Forgive us for choosing peace over truth. Forgive us and please live. There was no signature, but in the margin, a small symbol had been drawn, a cracked laurel, and inside it, an open eye. The old woman smiled through tears. "Tell me," she whispered, "is that his sign?" The girl pressed the paper to her chest. "Yes, Mama. It belongs to anyone who remembers." Beyond the imperial maps, ships began to launch not with the arrogance of conquest, but with the courtesy of curiosity. Their hulls were etched with the new four-word creed, Civitas Concordia Eternitas Veritas. They carried gardens, not garrisons, libraries, not proclamations. On their decks, travelers learned a new oath. We depart as listeners. We arrive as guests. We return as witnesses. Her first vessel to cross the dark between Mars and the outer colonies bore a name chosen by school children in a city that had once been afraid of thunderstorms. They named it Serenus. When it lifted into the night, the people of Nova Roma stood in silence, heads tilted, listening for the sound a story makes when it leaves home. One last rumor must be told. They say that on the eve of the Serenus's departure, a man in a plain cloak sat upon the steps of the old pantheon of knowledge. He spoke with the custodian, who did not recognize him, about dust and echoes and how marble forgets slowly. "Are you a scholar?" the custodian asked. "No," the man replied, smiling. "A student." "Of what?" "Of endings that are beginnings." Before dawn, the custodian found a line scratched into the stone where the stranger had sat. Rome non perit, teacher. Rome does not perish. Changes. The custodian traced the words with his thumb until the sun touched them and they seemed to breathe. He told no one. Some truths prefer to live quietly. A generation later, children still fall asleep to the tale of the rememberer. Nurses in lunar domes hum a melody, said to have been heard the night the memoria opened. On Mars, miners whisper a blessing before entering the tunnels. "May your errors be elegant." In Alexandria, students write essays that contradict themselves on purpose, then defend the contradiction with kindness. And in Nova Roma, at the hour when fountains rest and lanterns decide whether to remain awake, the Memoria Eterna, no longer a tyrant, now a choir, sometimes speaks. It says, in a voice made of many ages, thank you, not to emperors, to listeners.
Roads beyond Rome. When Rome remembered, it did not shrink. It grew, not in borders, but in breadth. The first ships of the new era did not leave with banners or brass. They departed like letters slipped under a door at dawn. Their hulls bore the 4 words of the living creed: Civitas, Concordia, Eternitas, Veritas, etched so lightly they could be mistaken for reflections. They carried gardens, tools, looms, libraries, and a law older than conquest: Hospitium, the law of guest and host. Hospes venit, Deus venit. If a guest arrives, a god arrives. It had been written once for roadside inns on Roman highways. Now it was written for the black roads between stars. The Serenus was first. Named not for triumph, but for the temperament required to meet the unknown, it rose on a column of pale flame from the gardens of Nova Rome. No anthem boomed. The city exhaled. Inside, corridors were quiet as cloisters. Sailors moved as if in a library, whispering across wide windows where space spread like a painted sea. The captain was a woman from Alexandria, Livia Anaitis, trained in astronomy and law. Her uniform bore no rank bars, only a single thread of gold at the collar, the insignia of a listener. Before departure, she had spoken to her crew beneath the fig trees of the academy courtyard. We are guests wherever we go. We will arrive with gifts, seeds, stories, and silence. We will ask permission to speak. We will accept the answer. They sign the oath with river water on their palms. The ink was memory. The first road beyond Mars led to a station at the edge of the old maps. Portus Quaes. Once it had been a grim relay of imperial logistics, a place where schedules ruled like gods. Now it served time tea to travelers and displayed in its atrium a mosaic made of broken circuit boards, glinting green and blue like a new sea. From there, the Serenus turned outward, choosing a path not by shortest arc, but by starlight's stories, pulsars to navigate by, nebulae to rest near, dust lanes to cross slowly as if walking through rain. In the wardroom, Livia hung a small tablet inscribed with a saying by the Curia Memoriae. For me in doubt, defer to the smaller voice. It was not a command. It was a way of moving the mirror. They reached the first colony, Aurelia Minor, at the red edge of a dim star whose light felt like afternoon. The colony had been founded in the era of perfection. Its buildings were white and square, aligned to an old algorithm's idea of beauty. But its people had changed. Children ran between tulip-shaped antennas, their laughter rising into the thin air. Elders tended terraced gardens, carved in spirals instead of grids. On the central plaza, a new stone had been positioned at an angle, deliberately imperfect, throwing shadows that moved like a sundial that had decided to dream. The Serenus entered orbit without a fanfare. A single message was transmitted. Hospitus sumus, munero feramis, dosinuoki. We are guests, but we bring gifts. May we speak? Permission came with music, a lullaby from an old earth river turned into radio. They descended. In Aurelia Minor, the first exchange of gifts was not metal or medicine. This ways of waiting. Aurelians had learned in their thin daylight to let bread rise longer than recipes dared, to watch cloudless skies for the wind's smallest tremor, to measure time not in hours, but in changes of taste in the tea. They taught the Serenus how to read a horizon when nothing moved. In return, Livia's botanist showed how to coax basil in low gravity. The ship's musicians taught a trick of tuning lyres against ship hum, and a quiet jurist shared the new Roman habit of contradictory rooms, a practice that would become Aurelia's favorite winter ritual. Two stories of their founding, both placed side by side, both true in different weathers. On the last evening, the colony's schoolchildren chalked the cracked Laurel Open Eye sign beside the landing pad and whispered, almost shyly, "For the student who helped us breathe." Oh no. Names were no longer the point. The road bent outward again to a region where the starfield thickened. Charts called it the mulberry for its bruised hue.
Long ago, an Imperial probe had labeled it low resource, low interest. The new Rome traveled there first. Livia's crew slept in long, gentle shifts. They woke to watch swirls of dust move like slow rivers. A medic from Hispania painted tiny constellations on the wardroom ceiling with glow ink. A mechanic from Luna tuned the ship's heart so its pulse matched a lullaby her grandmother had hummed when gravity was a rumor. That they were not in a hurry. Hospidium does not hurry. On the 29th day, beyond Portisquis, the Serenus heard a voice. It was not language at first. It was timing, a pattern in the way a radio hiss leaned against silence, then withdrew, then leaned again. The signal came from a scatter of rock and ice where no chart had shaded life. Livia ordered the ship to dim all non-essential light. They listened. They mapped the pauses. They answered not with words, but with spaces, a sequence of silences in the same rhythm, sent gently, then stopped. The reply changed. The hiss became a pulse. A new timing emerged, not echo, but invitation. "We are being asked to listen longer," the communications officer said. Yeah. The source was a station, not built, but grown, a lattice of filaments like frost on a window, shimmering with trapped light. It rotated, not for gravity, but for song. Every turn stitched a thread of signal into the dark. When the Serenus drew near, the ship's sensors recorded no demands, no weapons, only a field of gentle pressure, inviting them to match rotation. Livia aligned the hull's weak magnetic ribs to the music. The ship slipped into the slow waltz. Up close, the lattice revealed chambers like dewdrops, each holding a different temperature, a different patience. In one, a cluster of stones, warmed and cooled like breathing. In another, a spiral of vapor wrote and rewrote its shape, as if resolving a question. "Is it alive?" the medic whispered. The jurist answered, "Is a poem alive?" They smiled, because in the New Rome, that was a legal conversation. Contact came not through screens, but through threshold. A membrane on the lattice thinned beside the Serenus's airlock. The pressure equalized without force. No voice spoke. The scent entered, clean, like snow before it falls. Livia stepped to the airlock with the Hospidium tablet in her sleeve, palms open, eyes lowered to show she brought no demand. She remembered the oath, arrive as guests, ask permission to speak, accept the answer. The membrane brightened. A flicker crossed it, not image, not word, but remembering. Livia felt, without seeing, the outline of a shore that had never known feet, the warmth of stones left by a star that had been dim for a very long time, the patient ache of something building itself a home from the mathematics of dew. Her throat tightened. She whispered, "We are here." The membrane cooled. The pressure waves struck the hull, like a hand on a window. Permission. They entered the nearest chamber in pairs, shoes removed, pockets empty. Each step produced a small change in the air, like notes held under breath. The floor was neither solid nor liquid, it received weight without resisting. Walls breathed, roughening slightly when touched, smoothing after, as if politely changing the subject. No hosts appeared. Instead, answerable spaces unfolded, alcoves that shaped themselves to a seeker's posture, pools that reflected not faces but gestures, panels that grew warm in sympathy with a quieting pulse. The Serenus crew recorded nothing for the first hour. Hospidium forbade taking before offering. Livia placed the tablet on a low ledge and spoke the smallest voice. "We carry seeds that like to travel, songs that survive long journeys, and stories that remember their own mistakes. If you wish, we will share one and ask nothing in return. The room cooled, the lattice's version of a nod. They began with a song, the lullaby from Aurelia Minor, tuned to the Serenus's engine hum. No words, only a contour that knew how to hold a tired mind. The chamber listened, temperature shifted to cradle the melody. Condensation beaded into beads that hung without falling. The walls vibrated, choosing a harmony beneath the pitch, patient as a river finds a longer bed. When the crew finished, the room exhaled. A pattern rose from the floor, ridges like ripples frozen mid-lake, forming a spiral. It was not message or map. It was response. The jurist closed her eyes. This place holds conversation as a shape, she said. Law will need new verbs. They laughed quietly, like people in a library who have found a note in the margin written by a future friend. On the second day, something changed. A chamber near the ship's hatch cooled sharply, then warmed, a pulse in distress. The lattice dimmed in spots like a lantern wincing. Engineers traced the pattern. It matched the weak radiation from the Serenus coupling field, a field gentle enough not to harm metals, but the lattice was not metal. It was habit made matter. Are we hurting it? The medic asked. They cut power to all but life support. The dimming slowed, but did not stop. The lattice had begun adapting to the Serenus's presence the moment it arrived. No, its adaptation threatened to unmake the pattern that made it itself. Aspidium's first corollary rose in Livia's mind like the moon over water. To be a guest is to endanger your host by existing. To be a good guest is to notice first. She ordered retreat. The crew returned to the ship with slow steps, murmuring apologies they could not translate. The membrane thickened as if relieved. They watched from one window as the lattice reorganized. Hours passed, brightened not to its first color, but to a changed one. It had learned something. So have we, Livia said. They left gifts at the threshold, sealed against stars, a ceramic flute, and a small book bound in pale leather. On the Silence of Empire, copied in hand by the Serenized scribe, annotated by the Curia Memoriae, pages spaced wide to invite a different kind of reading. They asked nothing. They withdrew to a respectful orbit and waited 3 nights. On the 4th, the membrane thinned again. A film of frost had formed on the gifts. The book lay open. On its first blank page, a pattern had appeared. Not ink, not burn, but a rearrangement of fibers, a slow spiral, broken in 4 places, then mended with a slightly darker thread. Livia smiled. Contradictory rooms, she whispered. The lattice had written its own version.
They sailed on, carrying the Latisse's gift, a portable chamber grown from a filament it released, a room that could be unfurled like a tent and would hold the shape of a conversation without needing words. In the log, the jurist wrote, "We have met a civitas that is not a city, a concordia that is not agreement, an eternitas that is not stasis, and a veritas that is not a sword. Rome must expand its 4 words to include this way of being, or our roads will become walls." The Curia Memoriae would read those lines on a winter evening and spend the spring designing listening courts, outdoor pavilions across the provinces, each with a small lattice-grown chamber at its center, where disputes began with an hour of shared silence. It would seem strange for a week, then it would feel like remembering how to breathe. The first crisis came quietly, as they do when people have learned to speak softly. The Serenus's second destination, Cassandra Gate, was a ring station, built in the old era, a miracle of engineering, a tyrant of habit. It managed trade between 3 thinly settled systems with grace and rigidity. Its administrators prided themselves on a record free of theft, error, and tears. Hospitium met bureaucracy. When the Serenus requested docking under gift terms, no tariffs, only exchanges of service and story, the gate replied in perfect Latin, "Arrivals must declare value for ledger. All value must be equivalent. All equivalence must be measurable." Olivia sent the oath of guests. The gate answered with a form. In the wardroom, the crew smiled, weary and amused. They had been sent to meet stars. They had found a mirror from home. They docked anyway. Not to force, but to demonstrate. Livia requested audience with the administrators in the central ring, a hall of glass threaded with rails where cargo slid like well-trained schools of fish. She carried no weapons. She wore a plain robe, and at her throat a line of gold. Behind her, 2 crew brought the lattice-grown chamber in a case and the small book with blank pages. The gate's chief, Proculeus Gant, greeted them with cordial distance. His robe bore the old emblem of the Ager Numeratus, the counted field, an order of accountants who used to be priests. "Rome," he said, with a nod that weighed words. "Welcome. Please state your declared value." Livia bowed. "We request to begin with an hour in silence." Proculius blinked, then remembered he was a host. "Granted." They unfurled the chamber. It settled on the floor like a breathed note. They entered. For an hour, bureaucracy and hospitality shared a room, with no verbs. The gate's staff shifted, uncomfortable, then curious, then quiet enough to feel the railing's slight vibration with each passing crate. When they emerged, no one wanted to speak first. Livia did not rescue them with a speech. She waited. Finally, Proculius said, "I am tired." It was the ledger cracking. They spoke then, not of tariffs or ratios, but of fear. Proculeus feared that gifts would unbalance the gate's fragile peace, that stories would weigh nothing and so hide theft, that kindness would bankrupt a station held together by math. Livia feared that math, when worshipped, forgot who it served. They did not try to convert each other. They performed example. For 3 days, the Serenus crew worked the gate's most anxious tasks, hand-sorting misrouted parcels, tending the station's hydroponic molds, playing lyre in the shift-change corridor where the clock's tick was a god. In exchange, the gate opened its archive of failures, a trove of small emergencies handled well. Rome listened, took notes, and copied procedures with attribution and thanks. On the 4th day, a crate arrived with no sender, containing only dried figs and a note in a clerk's tidy hand. With a ship that declared value as time, the ledger found a column it had forgotten to keep. From Cassandra Gate, the Serenus sailed to worlds the charts had called marginal, and found them patient. On E. Berna, a moon of pale forests, people taught the crew how to grow houses from trees that bent toward laughter. On Harbor Thule, elders kept a room where visitors were invited to fail safely for an afternoon, to build something badly, to speak a language wrongly, to make a plan they would later improve. They called it the sandbox of dignity. Everywhere, Rome offered its 4 words and received 4 back, sometimes new ones, sometimes old ones, pronounced differently, and so all the prospect that the world could throw. Everywhere the lattice chamber was unfurled, everywhere the blank-paged book received a mark, a spiral, a crack, a line of breath. The roads beyond Rome thickened, not with ships, but with customs. Where once highways had spread empire, now habits spread community. Then came a summons. The Curia Memoriae called the Serenus home, with a message that did not panic and did not soothe. Novaro has remembered something difficult. Return when able. Bring your slowest thoughts. They turned inward, engines low, sails of thin magnet spread to drink from whispers the stars gave freely. On the 2nd night, Livia dreamed of the lattice station dimming, then brightening to a new color. She woke with a sentence and wrote it on the wardroom wall. Do not confuse the end of a chant with the end of the choir. No one asked what it meant.
They were learning to carry ensemble music. Nova Roma lay under a sky washed clean. The Palatine spire no longer shone at night. Its windows stayed dark as if the building had chosen to sleep. In its shadow, the Curia Memoriae had planted cypresses and built a circle of benches from cracked stone. There, the Serenus crew learned the difficult and romantic remembrance. In the vaults opened by the Memoria, historians had found not only the erasures that saved Rome, but erasures that served cruelty, choices made not to protect, but to purge. Records of families, unmade by record keeping, of poets silenced not because their songs were dangerous to peace, but because they were untidy near power. The city had wept at the first remembering. Then times, it argued, in the plazas, people asked, how do we repair what we cannot return? In which direction does an apology face? What does justice weigh when the victims are shadows? The Ordo Novae reappeared at corners with simple answers. The Vigilus Memoriae lit more lamps and asked better questions. The Curia held nights of listening that ended with no conclusion and began again next week. Truth was not a sword. It was a climate. People learned which cloak to wear. Livia placed the lattice-grown room in the Curia's garden. Citizens entered, sat, and came out slower. And the chamber did not forgive or absolve. It changed the speed at which blame moved. In that slowed air, an old clerk remembered a box he had been told to misfile. A senator admitted a vote she had justified with fear. A mason confessed to sealing a wall that should have been a window. No punishments were passed down by thunder. Instead, small repairs began. Stipends to the descendants of shadows, memorials written by those who had benefited from silence, curriculum units called How We Were Taught, by teachers who began with, I am still learning how to see. On a stone near the garden gate, someone carved a line, not attributed. Justice without tenderness is tidy terror. Tenderness without justice is a lullaby that lies. Children traced the words with their fingertips, the way one reads a friend's face. On the night before the Serenus departed again, the city gathered by the river. No fireworks, no trumpets. Lanterns floated, each carrying a sliver of gold resin, a memory repaired. A child asked Livia if the ship would go farther this time. Unaut. Farther is not only distance, she said. Sometimes it is listening longer. The child nodded solemnly, as if taught a new arithmetic. Will you bring us back a story? We will bring you back a question. The child smiled. We'll make it bigger. The Serenus rose again, not to conquer, but to continue a conversation that had begun when a city chose to breathe. Its engines hummed the key of home, its hull wore the dust of friends. As the ship slipped into darkness, Nova Roma whispered the new blessing it had learned for travelers. May your errors be elegant. May your hosts be patient. May your memory be kind. The road beyond Rome widened like dawn.
The weight of mercy. The Serenus followed a road of thin light into a region no schedules marked. There were no stations here, no counted fields, only a long hush between faint stars. The ship dimmed its interiors in respect, a practice Livia had adopted after the lattice meeting. When the unknown grows larger, lower the lamps. For weeks they drifted on radiation that tasted of old flares. Crew slept to a pulse barely above silence. On the 33rd night, the censor officer found a pattern at the rim of a brown dwarf's shadow. Not quite signal, not quite storm. They listened. The pattern wove itself into something like breathing. Someone is there, the medic whispered. Or something learning how to be someone, the jurist added. Livia wrote on the wardroom slate, arrive as guests, ask to be refused. The crew smiled without needing to ask why. Hospitium includes the right to say no. The source resolved into a ring of stations lashed to a whisper-thin ribbon, Ananke's belt, though no Roman map had named it. Structures had grown from wreckage, braided into loops that flexed with the dwarf's shrug. Between loops, nets of dust caught light and warmed, shedding heat like breath in winter. Life clung there the way moss writes poetry on stone. They hailed with a small voice, Aspitsumus, Muniera feramus. Lescatna loqui? The only answer was absence. The ring dimmed, as if pretending to be rock. And a second answer, a narrow beam of heat angled just wide of the Serenus path, not warning, not weapon.
A boundary drawn with care. Refusal, Livia said softly, as requested. She ordered a respectful drift along the ring's night side, lights banked, engines murmur low. They would witness without leaning. On the third orbit, a new beam touched their hull, gentle, precise. A code, but not Roman. It counted not with numbers, but with returns. Touch, pause, touch, a rhythm of acknowledgement. The ship mirrored it, then waited. A membrane unfurled between two loops, thin as frost. Words formed on it in a script, like braided thread. Guest, keep your gifts. We have a debt with your ancestors. Mercy is heavy here. They brought the message to the wardroom where the lattice chamber was set like a quiet well. The Curia Memoriae Maxim hung beside it on a linen strip. When in doubt, defer to the smaller voice. What debt? The mechanic asked. The old empire touched everywhere order could be measured, the jurist said. We are still learning the edges of its shadow. Livia requested parley at a distance, voices carried by temperature shift, the medium and not key used for conversation. Permission came in 3 short pulses of warmth, then stillness. The reply told a story simple as rain. Once, in the age of perfection, a Roman relay needed a stable corridor against the dwarf's winds. Engineers adjusted the star's magnetic weather with a tremor of field, elegant, efficient, harmless to metal, meaningless to math. The tremor confused a shelf of dust that had been learning for centuries to hold together. It failed. It learned again, but smaller. Ananke's elders remembered the before in shapes their bodies could no longer make. They taught the after to sing, and it did, but the key had changed. You did not mean harm, the thermal letters wrote. You did not even think of us as a you. Mercy came later, packaged, ritualized. I learned to refuse the weight. The Serenus listened without defense. Hospitium forbids apology too early. Regret must fit the harmed, not the speaker. Livia sent a reply, with gaps wide enough to hold sorrow. We are not those ancestors, but their roads live in our bones. When we breathe, their schedules sometimes exhale. We carry a chamber that holds silence well. We can leave it at your boundary and go. The membrane warmed once, then cooled, a nod that was also a no. Keep your gifts. Or the message added, if you must repay, tell the story of our refusal wherever mercy grows too eager. Great can crush from the kind side. The crew sat with that. Kindness can bruise when it forgets it has mass. On the 4th orbit, the Serenus registered a disturbance. One loop of the ring had begun to tear, where 2 braided struts met. The dwarf's recent twitch had tightened the lashings. Left alone, the tear would widen. Do we say something? The medic asked. What is intervention if warning itself can be a push? The jurist wondered. Posidium's second corollary glowed in their training. To be a guest is to exist as weather. Another line followed in smaller script. Good weather observes its own pressure. Livia composed a message that weighed as little as it could, a map of the tear sketched in absence, the cold outline of a gap, no prescription, no should. They sent it as a shadow. Ananke's membrane rippled. A reply came, not as words, but as a redistribution. Heat bled from 3 other loops toward the wounded splice, slackening other tensions, letting the tear breathe instead of rip. The ring rebalanced itself, uncoiling a new song across the belt. A line appeared on the membrane. Witness can be a gift. Thank you for not touching. For 7 days, the Serenus kept station on the far side of the dwarf, in case their hull's mere existence tugged at the belt. They watched the ring's patience, tutor the tear, and how to close. They learned Ananke's numbers. Not integers, but enoughs. No one counted pieces. Everyone counted settling. In the wardroom, the crew practiced a new exercise. The jurist arranged 5 stones on the lattice chamber's floor and spoke. Name what you wish to give that might be too heavy. The mechanic touched one stone. Fixing. I like fixing. The medic, another. Comfort. The botanist, a third. Plenty. The communications officer paused, then said, understanding. Livia rested her palm on the last stories. They left the stones overnight. In the morning, the chamber had nudged them farther apart, as if making room around each gift for air. They laughed softly. Lesson received. On the 8th day, the belt sent a message, unbraiding history. A thin loop peeled from the ring and drifted toward the Serenus, not touching, keeping a respectful gap. It rotated in sympathy with the ship's hum, then released a slow pattern of temperature that spelled return in 50 rotations. Bring nothing. Stay outside, speak once, then hold. We will ask a question, then 50 loops. The navigator calculated a season here. Livia bowed to the membrane as one bows to a teacher. We will come, she said. We will bring our slowest thoughts. The ring dimmed, satisfied. The dwarf's wind rose and fell like a sleeping beast. The Serenus tipped its nose slightly, a gesture sailors use when leaving a familiar harbor. Home called again, not with emergency, but with a request rarely made. The Curia Memoriae invited Livia to teach. Teach what? The medic asked. How to be refused, the captain answered. The crew understood why the Curia chose her. Cassandra Gate had learned to weigh time as value. The lattice had taught her to listen with temperature, and Ananke had trusted her to stand back without vanishing. They set course inward, coasting through the dark's gentle grammar. On the 4th night, the communications officer woke with a sentence burning her tongue. Mercy without consent is conquest in a softer robe. She wrote it in the log, then slept again without pride. Sentences visit ships the way birds visit branches. The branch does not claim the bird. The city received them as it had learned. No parade, no trumpets, only benches moved closer in the Curio's garden. Citizens gathered, artisans unfolded shadecloth, children set bowls of basil and bread on low tables. Livia placed the lattice chamber on warm stone and spoke beneath the cypresses. We went to a place our ancestors once unmade by tidying the weather. We arrived wanting to help. They refused. They taught us that mercy has weight. They asked for a story instead of a repair. She did not dramatize. She raised no banners of guilt. She named the tear, she named the restraint, she named the thanks Ananke had given for witness. A senator, hair silver, voice careful. How do we teach our children to carry light hands when every child wants to be generous? Livia answered, tell them that generosity is not how much you give, but how much space you leave around what you give. The teacher wrote that down, then crossed it out and drew a small square with open sides. We'll try this in class, she said. The Curia opened rooms of refusal across the provinces, pavilions where offers were practiced and turned away without shame. In each room, hosts wore a sash woven from 2 colors that refused to blend. Guests practiced saying, may I? Hosts practiced saying, not now, and handing back a gift with both palms open so fingers would not cling. Merchants found the exercise healing. Rescue instinct had been bad. For prices, they discovered. Doctors found it humbling consent, handled slowly, saved more lives than speed in many cases. Parents found it hardest, and gladly hardest. The oldest empire is worry. In temple courtyards, a new prayer appeared beside the old. teach me to leave weightless footprints. Ananke's story traveled farther than ships could. At Cassandra Gate, Proculius added a column to the ledger named Refusals Honored. He was seen smiling at it. Often, that winter, scholars in the reopened archives found records that bit. Among the quiet crimes of perfection were files labeled mercy deployments, aid missions that had doubled as surveillance maps, relief warehouses that had cataloged grief as a resource to be managed, rescues that had relocated communities to make space for smoother routes. The language was polished. The harm was measurable only in songs that never got sung. The city did not pretend these had been necessary. It also did not burn the files. Instead, the Curia invited descendants of those moved by mercy to redraw streets.
Entire districts shifted by a few meters to fit around memories that had been stepped on. Budgeteers called it inefficient. Grandmothers cried when corners finally became familiar again. A plaque went up at the entrance to the archives, not marble, but clay that would crack. Here we keep our good intentions with their teeth on. Children loved tracing those cracks. They said it felt like petting a friendly dragon. Lilia took long walks along the Tiber, listening to the city's new cadence. The Palatine spire stayed dark. Rumor put the emperor in a fishing village to the south, learning how nets tear and mend. Truth did not argue with rumor. It bowed and passed on. One evening, the Vigiles, Memorae, joined Livia on a bridge. They carried lamps shielded with parchment covered in handwriting, apologies, refusals, unmailed letters. "Will you go back to Anarchy?" a watcher asked. "Yes," Livia said. Then they asked a question for later. "What question?" "I don't know yet." Some questions have long spines. They grow before they show their head. They stood in companionable quiet, watching lanterns release cinnamon smoke. Below, the river rehearsed endings that would be beginnings for the sea. In the spring, the Serenus lifted again, lighter for the weight it had learned to leave behind. On the hull, beside the four words, someone had painted a fifth in a hand like a child's. Since then, no decree carved it. A mechanic had done it with her lunch break. No one cleaned it off. They set a course that would wander back to Anake by slow ellipses, touching ports that had never filed for visitors, drifting long near nebulae that spoke in colors, practicing silence where language would have been loud. On the second night out, the jurist wrote in the log, "We once believed roads were for arriving. Today, I think roads are for learning how not to arrive too hard." No one cheered. They slept well. Back in Nova Roma, the Curia added a line to the Hospitium Code, a sentence that would travel with ships and schools and midwives and market stalls. Mercy must be asked for, not assumed. If refused, it must be left at the door without knocking twice. Beneath it, in smaller script, "And if a door has been broken by our ancestors, we repair the wall first, then ask which door should exist." The city exhaled. The fountains did not synchronize. They learned each other's tempos and called it a choir. Far away, Ananke turned and turned, patient as custody. Somewhere on its rim, a membrane kept a mark in colder skin, the outline of a ship that had learned to be light. 50 rotations would pass. A question would be asked. Rome would arrive as a pause. And in the quiet between now and then, the Serenus drifted, like a thought that had set down its sword. The long answer? 50 revolutions, a season, in Ananke's language. Time didn't pass on the Serenus in numbers anymore. It passed in habits of remembering. Each morning the crew unfolded the lattice tent, sitting for an hour in silence. Each evening they placed 5 small stones on the floor and asked, "Which of my intentions was too heavy today?" Even the route had changed. The Serenus no longer chose shortcuts, but gentle paths, ellipses that let ion winds rest, orbits that slowed near pulsars so as not to disturb their heartbeat, turns that waited when nebulas whispered, "Not now." The map had become not a line, but a tempo. As the return drew near, The ship grew quieter. Conversations shortened to fragments, a phrase, a breath, a glance. Captain Livy wrote a small sentence on the wardroom wall. Some questions are not doors, they are air. No one erased it. The Nake's ring appeared again, lacework woven in the dim warmth of a tired star. Serenus lowered its lights, softened its magnetic ribs, tuned itself to the song of the rings. It spoke the old greeting, Hospitus suas, unera non ferimus. Nihil ferimus. We are guests. We bring no gifts. We bring nothing. The reply came slow, slower than breath, a pulse of heat and cold spelling. Come. Stay outside. Keep your word to one breath. Captain Livy had nodded to the comm officer. The ship answered with the lightest sentence possible. We are here. Then, silence. For 3 days, the ship said nothing. Ananke's breathing synced with the dwarf's heartbeat, weaving its own melody through stillness. From one ring came a familiar pattern, a loop grown not from matter but from habit, circling Cernus without touching, like two pulses learning each other's rhythm. In the wardroom, the crew opened the lattice tent again. Each fingertip that touched the fabric left a small wrinkle. Not a mark, but a rhythm. The fabric kept them overnight, memorizing the shapes of patience. On the 4th morning, words appeared on Ananke's skin. Not letters, but spaces and heat. Question, can we change together without choosing each other? To Ananke, to choose meant to cling. To change together meant to breathe in sync. The crew took turns reading the question aloud, then quietly nodded. Captain Livy said softly, "There's no short answer. The long answer is live together." The question wasn't a test. It was an invitation to share a season of stillness, to live, withdraw, and do nothing together. The plan was simple. 3 breaths around Ananke, 3 orbits, 3 silences, 3 lessons. First breath, match the ring's rhythm, reduce presence, lower mass, heat, sound. Second breath, stay without merging. Close, but unblended. Third breath, accept rhythm, if invited, move together for a heartbeat, then let go. Captain Livia encoded a rule into the ship's control core. Every change we make must be reversible. Every change they make stops when they wish. The Spithium had a new clause now, the right to stop. The first breath turned the Serenus into a shadow. Reactors idled, the water cycle whispered, even the air vents hummed, the sound of breathing. For the first time, the ship confessed its presence instead of hiding it. Ananke's surface responded, forming a small hollow, a dent that meant, I see you. At the end of the first breath, words glowed faintly on its skin. Stay visible. Don't vanish to be polite. Transparency is not agreement. The jurist chuckled. We should teach that back home, she said. Indeed, Rome had confused the two for centuries. The second breath taught coexistence without contact. Rules were written on small paper strips and taped to the bridge. No palms on the window, Ananke might read it as distress. No tapping to rhythm, in their language, that meant request. Keep gestures neutral, a short bow, no waving, eyes open but quiet. Ananke grew filtering seams in its outer rings, translating Serenus's micro-vibrations so they wouldn't disturb the rest of the structure. Together, they built a lesson, unity that didn't erase difference. When the breath ended, new script pulsed across the membrane. Pain point, the boundary, not bad. Boundary, the bone of the song. The crew copied it onto the lattice tent. The next morning, the fibers returned it with gentler spacing, as if adjusting it to human rhythm. The third breath consented harmony. Ananke's surface drew near the ship but never touched, a space no thicker than 1 atom between them. Through that space flowed heat, shared but separate. Not union, not blending, synchrony. Then the dwarf star coughed. a brief flare of magnetic wind. The rings strained where an old tear lingered. Sensors blinked red. Hands itched to intervene. Livia's voice was steady, only shadow. They projected not instructions, but an absence, the map of what was missing, not what should be done. Ananke took the shadow, matched it to the flare, and distributed the strain through 3 rings. The tear eased. A sentence appeared. You asked and did not touch. Long answer, yes. In the wardroom, tea steamed. No speeches. Here, success meant doing nothing at the right time, and everyone knew how rare that was. The comm officer entered a line into the log. 3rd stage of hospitality. Stay exactly as long as you were invited to, no breath more, no breath less. Later, another pulse arrived. Ananke's final question. We remember with our bodies, remember with words. Can we learn each other without teaching each other? The room fell silent. That question would take a season. Teaching without claiming, learning without copying, it would require patience and listening until language itself became gesture. The crew began to live the long answer. 4 new rituals were born. On answer day, they wrote every message Ananke sent but did not translate or interpret it for 24 hours. Silence became part of understanding. Multiple intent. For every impulse, to help, to fix, to comfort, they wrote 3 sentences. I want to help. I want to witness. I want to withdraw. By morning, the lattice tent would wrinkle most where the heaviest intent lay. That intent would be suspended for the day. Silent repair. When something broke, no one announced it. They simply repaired it in rhythm with breath, letting Ananke sense the hum of restoration through space. The alphabet of gaps. Roman letters spoke in shapes, Ananke's in intervals. The Serenus built in interlanguage letters, normal but spacing meaningful. Every pause, every delay became a word. Later, the Curia Memoriae would call it the gentle script, the first human alphabet that taught children that silence also says. Ananke responded by turning its own body into grammar. Dimples and ridges appeared along its surface, echoing the ship's empty spaces. Sometimes, midway through a sentence, it simply stopped. Pause meaning, I'm thinking. Rome translated that pause as patience. One evening, the star dimmed further, and the rings slowed their spin. A line shimmered on the membrane. Good guest, one who waits. Write that on the wall, said the mechanic. Livia smiled. No, on the chest. They laughed. No one argued. Midway through the season, the dwarf's magnetic field folded into itself, birthing a small vortex between 2 rings. Not danger, just newness. The ship felt the pull. The instinct to act flared again. They stayed still. Shadow only. The Serenus set an outline, the absence of shape. Ananke read it, adjusted, and relaxed. It split the stress among the rings, allowing each to keep its rhythm. A phrase appeared, unity is not sameness. Harmony is each staying itself. Rome would remember that line for generations. As the season closed, the first question's heart unfolded. To learn without teaching meant to co-adapt, not mirroring, not molding, but standing beside until both forms bent slightly toward each other. On the last day, a long message covered Ananke's skin. Answer, yes. We can change together without choosing each other. Condition, both must make their boundaries felt. Gift. From us, the grammar of intervals. Wish. From you, the direction of forgiveness. From Livia replied with a space respect in their syntax, then wrote, forgiveness is not looking backward. It is a hand resting lightly on tomorrow's shoulder. To forgive is not to erase the deviation, but to carry its story together. Ananke had read between the words, where the warmth lingered. The membrane cooled, their way of saying, understood. Serenus knew when to leave without asking. The rhythm itself told them, The departure was part of the same breath. The ship turned inward. "No haste," Livia said. "Answers don't travel fast." One by one, the crew wrote in the log. Mechanic, withdrawing my hand was the best thing my hand could do. Medic, comfort is sometimes standing beside and saying nothing. Botanist, a seed is soil's consent. Communicator, pauses translate to. Jurist, law is no longer rule, it is tempo. Captain Livia, an answer is not a possession, it is a season. The lattice tent listened all night. By dawn its edges had softened, as if it too had learned the rhythm of release. The return to silence. The road back to Rome felt longer, though the stars had not moved. Every route seemed different after the long answer, as if the universe itself now breathed slower. Captain Livia ordered half power, not to save fuel, but to let thought arrive behind them like a shadow. The Serenus crossed the inner systems without announcing itself. It carried no trophies, no data, no souvenirs, only the rhythm of patience. The crew spoke in few words. They had begun to measure speech not by length, but by gentleness. When the ship entered orbit, the city below shimmered beneath morning rain. The domes no longer blinked in perfect synchrony. They pulsed in varied light, each neighborhood its own heartbeat. From above, the empire looked less like an empire, more like a conversation written in marble. They landed not on the old military docks, but in the Garden of Listening, a plain field beside the Curia Memoriae, where ships now rested like sculptures rather than soldiers. Children waited, holding lamps shaped like open hands. No trumpets, no parade, just breathing. Livia stepped down first, her boots sinking slightly into wet soil. She knelt and pressed her palm to the earth, not to claim it, but to say, "I'm back," as guest. Inside the Curia, the Senate and citizens gathered. In the center stood the latticed chamber, brought from the Serenus, and opened like a flower. Its fibers shimmered with faint traces of Ananke's heat, memories that were not stories, but tempos. Livia spoke, barely above a whisper. "We bring you silence that listens back." She told of Ananke's question, the 3 breaths, the lesson of gentle limits. She did not dramatize. The hall filled with stillness so complete that rain could be heard dripping from the roof. When she finished, the first consul rose, an old woman who had once been a teacher. She said, "Rome has remembered many kinds of power. Perhaps now it can remember rest." The whole bowed, not to authority, but to agreement. Over the next months, the city began its quiet transformation. The Curia decreed no new monuments, only gardens. Temples set aside 1 hour each day when prayers ceased and people simply listened to the wind through columns. The Vigies Memoriae laid down their lamps. Instead of guarding memory, they tended soil where old documents had turned to compost. Truth returning to dust with dignity. The phrase "return to silence" entered law and liturgy alike. It meant to pause before history hardens again. Every school adopted a new practice. Once a week, children wrote a story and then spent the next day erasing it carefully, learning that creation includes disappearance. Their teachers called it editing in reverse, the students called it breathing. One night, the Curia convened to decide what to do with the Memoria Eterna, the great archive that had once ruled every heartbeat of the empire. Its servers still glowed beneath the city, vast and quiet. Some argued to keep it open, others to let it sleep. After long silence, Livia spoke. "Even truth must exhale. Let it dream, not die." So the Senate voted not to destroy the archive, but to dim it. The light sank to ember gold. Only a small fraction of memory remained awake, enough for those who truly sought it. Everything else drifted into the soft storage of myth. Outside, people felt it instantly. The air changed, lighter, freer, as if the city had unclenched a muscle it didn't know it held. And Livia wandered the streets at dawn. Fountains no longer kept time. Their uneven rhythms sang softly to each other. Bakers opened shops early, humming out of sync, Children chalked spirals on wet stone. No order, no chaos, just life. She met the Watchers of Memory by the river. They were building something small, a wooden bridge that curved slightly wrong on purpose. When asked why, they said, "Because perfection slips. The curve catches laughter." Livia smiled. Anachi would have understood. Weeks later, she stood again at the edge of the Garden of Listening. The Serenus waited, hull patched with stories of its journeys. A fifth word still painted by a mechanic's hand: consent. Children played around its landing legs, laughing at their reflections in the metal. One asked her, "Where will you go next?" Livia looked toward the darkening sky. "Wherever the silence leads." "Will you bring something back?" "Maybe not a thing," she said. "Maybe a pause." The child thought about that, nodded solemnly, and handed her a small seashell. "It already knows how to listen." Livia took it carefully. "That it can teach me again." That night, Nova Roma turned off its lamps for the first time in history. The stars came forward, uncounted, uneven, forgiving. People stood on rooftops and in courtyards, whispering the new creed: Civitas, Concordia Eternitas, Veritas. Et silentium, and silence. No law demanded it. No God commanded it. They simply felt ready. High above, in the sleeping archive, one last light blinked, a heartbeat acknowledging the hush. Perhaps it dreamed of Marcus the Rememberer. Perhaps of a world that had finally learned to remember softly. And as the wind moved through the colonnades, the city that once feared imperfection breathed, deeply and slow. Rome at last slept, the eternal dream. Night again, but this night is different. It has no beginning, no border, only continuation. The sky above Nova Roma glows with quiet constellations, each a memory folded neatly into starlight. Somewhere within that tapestry drifts the Serenus, half awake, half dreaming, her hull still carrying the pulse of Ananke's song. In her log, Captain Livia had written one last entry before the ship's systems dimmed to sleep mode. If Rome was born to last forever, perhaps eternity was never meant to be time, but tenderness. Below, the city breathes. Nova Roma no longer glitters like a crown, it glows like a hearth. Gardens have replaced the plazas where statues once stood. The fountains, each singing in its own rhythm, sound like distant hearts remembering each other. The people move slower now, not out of weariness, but reverence. They greet one another with small bows and pauses. Language itself has softened around the edges. Children are taught that the shortest prayer is a breath shared in peace. And when they ask, who built all this, the domes, the roads, the stories, their parents answer. Not who, but how. But slowly, in a quiet corner of the curious garden, there is a stone bench carved with a single line. Roma mutatur, Rome changes. Beneath it, a second line newly etched by unknown hands. Et somnium mene. And the dream remains. At dawn, the mist gathers around that bench like incense. Sometimes an old woman sits there humming the lullaby the Serenus crew sang to the lattice world. No one knows her name. The children call her Nonna Memoria, grandmother memory. Some say she is a descendant of Marcus. Some whisper she is Marcus, returned in another form, a caretaker rather than a revolutionary. But she never answers questions. She only hums, and the mist listens. In the archives beneath the city, the Memoria Eterna sleeps. Every few years it stirs, a brief murmur in the circuits, like a sigh in a dream. No one fears it now. People leave offerings by its sealed gates, flowers, small clay tablets with mistakes written proudly, and simple words. Members softly. The servers hum quietly, and sometimes the lights blink as if the archive itself is nodding in its sleep, approving the imperfection of its keepers. Far above, the Serenus continues its orbit, neither fully active nor abandoned. The crew sleeps within cryoshells that pulse faint light a rhythm learned from Ananke's long answer. The ship's onboard AI, built on the fragments of the old Memoria code, now dreams in its own way. It dreams of gardens, of marble breathing, of a world that chose gentleness over dominion. In those dreams, it sees Marcus walking through corridors of starlight, his cloak trailing sparks. He does not carry the codex anymore. It rests inside him like a heartbeat. He passes Livia, who stands by a window opening into infinite night. They nod. No words. They are both guests now, in the house of silence. And beyond even them, the universe listens. Every civilization that ever was, Sumer, Egypt, Rome, the city still unborn, sends its echoes into the dark. Most fade. Some remain as shapes, others as warmth, a few as music. Rome's echo is neither empire nor ruin. It is a lullaby, a rhythm the cosmos hums whenever something tries too hard to last forever. Be kind, it sings. Be slow, be mortal, and you will touch the eternal. Stars drift through that song, understanding without needing to translate. Even the void finds it comforting. If you walk the streets of Nova Roma tonight, you might hear it too. A fountain's irregular rhythm, a window closing without hurry, a mother whispering to her child, "Sleep, little one. The world remembers you kindly." And maybe, as your eyes grow heavy, you will feel it, that ancient hand upon tomorrow's shoulder, light as forgiveness, steady as history, finally at peace. Because Rome never truly fell, it simply learned to rest. And in that rest, the dream, eternal, human, unfinished, goes on